So he said a story that he knew a Jew who said to him, I'm going to tell you a story, but you cannot repeat it till after I'm Achei Temimim, until I pass. So Rabbi Pevsner publicized this story maybe a decade ago, that when the Rebbe visited Paris, our Rebbe visited Paris in 1947, he was not yet the Rebbe, of course. A man walked over to the Rebbe and said, I have many relatives, maybe even children, and I've lost track of many of them. I don't even know where they are. And I need to know if they're alive or not. So the Rebbe gave him practical suggestions. Go to this organization, travel to this city and meet this person. And he said to the Rebbe, I did all that. I think it was children. There's several of my children, a number of my children, I don't know if they're alive or dead. I'd like to know. I don't know where they are. So the Rebbe played a game with him. He says, you could write to the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe is Ruach HaKodesh. He says, I have no time to write to the Rebbe. I need you to help me. He pressured the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, I'll tell you what, I'll do something for you, but you have to promise you're not going to tell anybody until after Gimel Tammuz. You understand? The Rebbe said, write down the names of all your children on a piece of paper. So he did. The Rebbe walked over to the window and he looked at the piece of paper in the sunlight. And he told him, this one is alive, and this one is alive, and this one is alive, and this one is alive. He told him exactly which of his children was still alive. Later he would find them. And the Rebbe didn't say this one is not alive, but he understood by inference. The Rebbe told him, this one is alive, this one is alive. The story only was able to be revealed more recently, but it's one of those incredible Rebbe stories from before the Rebbe was a Rebbe. Anyway, while he was in France, he met a man, not a Lubavitcher, not a Chassid, a Litvak, Lithuanian Jew, a big scholar, a very learned man. And he and the Rebbe hit it off. The Rebbe was a scholar and he was a scholar, and they talked. They schmoozed, they talked about Torah. And he developed quite a rapport with the Rebbe. When the Rebbe would see him, it was very warm. They shared ideas. This man, I don't know where he was during the war, but he had been married for quite a few years, and he didn't have any children. So the Chassidim said to him, the Lubavitcher said to him, this is the son-in-law of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you should ask him for a bracha for children. He says, no, I'm a Litvak. I don't believe in Rebbes. I got one God, that's enough for me. I don't go to Rebbes. And they said, listen, you need children, you want children, what do you got to lose? If you don't believe in Rebbes, nothing's going to happen, right? What do you got to lose? Anyway, the Chabadniks pressured him that he should ask the Rebbe for a bracha, and he hesitated and he balked, and he finally, right before Pesach, he met the Rebbe, and as was their custom, they talked, and the topic of the conversation was Pesach. And of course, the highlight of Pesach is the children. The highlight of Pesach is the children, right? It's the Pesach, you don't just eat matzah and eat mutton and drink wine. You talk, right? Pesach, you talk. You tell the story. And the design of the Seder specifically is you tell the story to the children. The children gather and you get them to ask questions. As you know the tradition, we do many things in the Haggadah. We do various things simply to make the children curious, to wonder why we're doing it. And of course, you and I know the whole thing is a choreography. Why? Because the kids know it's going to happen, and the kids were told in school that this strange thing is going to happen, so you should ask. In fact, the best prepared people at the Seder are the little children. The younger they are, the more prepared they are. But we do it. And the kids say, why are we doing it differently? We wash our hands. Instead of eating bread, we eat a little vegetable, and then push away the bread as if we're going to bench. We put up a second cup. Wait a minute, the second cup is the afternoon meal. We haven't eaten. So the kid says, Manishtana. And we have 4 children at the Seder. Each one is on a different level. And each one speaks to us differently. Unfortunately, there are children who don't even ask. And as we all know, the Rebbe spoke about the child, the 5th son that doesn't come to the Seder. And you have to go and find him, and you have to bring him to the Seder. Parenthetically, I'm sorry for changing the subject on you. I heard this story. I don't know when this happened, but I believe it's true that at some point in the 70s, the Jewish American establishment decided on an idea. The idea was right before Pesach. And they made a proposal that every single Jewish family in America should have an empty seat at the table to represent one of the children that was killed in the Holocaust. They killed over 1 million children, 1.5 million children. So it was an idea that every Jewish family in America should have an empty seat at the table to represent one of the children who was killed in the Holocaust who's not coming to the Seder. And the Rebbe spoke about it, and the Rebbe said it's a brilliant idea. I think it's an amazing idea. You should have an empty chair, but you shouldn't leave it empty. Go find the child who's out in the street and put him in that empty chair. Don't have an empty seat. Prepare an extra seat and then go find somebody to sit in it. In any case, this rabbi, this Talmud Chacham, and the Rebbe were talking about the Seder, and about Pesach, and about the children, about asking questions, and the parents answering the questions, and so on and so forth. And as the conversation was finishing, this man said to the Rebbe, I need to tell you that the Chassidim, your fans here, are harassing me that I should ask you for a bracha for children. I'm a Litvak. I don't believe in Rebbes. It's not my program. But they've convinced me that I should ask anyway, even though it's not my thing. So the Rebbe put his hand out. And this man shook the Rebbe, and the Rebbe very, very warmly, very, very warmly, shook his hand, and with a smile he said to him, Das is far v'higad levincha. In Yiddish, the Rebbe said to him. The biblical passage, you have to tell the child the story. And the Rebbe shook his hand and said to him, Das is far v'higad levincha. Which means you should be able to tell the story, to say that to your own children. Anyway, he moved to Israel with his wife, and by the next year, they had a ben zocha, they had a little boy, one child. He grew up in Bnei Brak, in a non-Hasidic community, amongst non-Hasidim. But his father would always say to the little boy that if people speak disparagingly of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you need to be quiet. I'm not telling you to protest, but you need to not involve yourself in it, because you were born from a blessing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I mean, fast forward 40 years, it's 1991 or something like that. This man is now a 40-year-old father. And for the first time in his life, he's leaving the Holy Land, he's leaving Israel, coming to the United States to participate in a wedding, which took place in Lakewood, New Jersey. And he decides on Sunday that he needs to go see the Rebbe. His father had told him that he was born from a bracha of the Rebbe. So he finds his way to Brooklyn, he gets online. For those of us who remember that, I tell the kinderlach, listen carefully. You never got $1, and maybe someone will give you $1, and you can have all kinds. The one thing you can never have, I'm talking to the children who never experienced dollars, the one thing nobody could give you is the waiting in line. You can get $1, but you can't wait 4 hours for $1. The part of the dollar that you don't understand, you waited, and you waited, and you waited, and you waited, and then the whole thing happened so fast. You waited for 3 hours, and you had 5 seconds with the boss. But that was dollars. He got in line and he waited. He didn't tell anybody he was with his own son. He was with a teenage son of his own. Anyway, the two of them woke up to the Rebbe. Imagine a man 41 years old, 40, born from a bracha from the Rebbe in 1947, has never seen the Rebbe before, does not belong to Chabad community at all. And he's coming to pay respects. His father had told him that he was born from a bracha of the Rebbe, so he felt that he has an obligation to come to the Rebbe, but he didn't say a word. He didn't introduce himself, he didn't tell him who he was. The Rebbe gives him $1, and if you remember, bracha v'atzlacha, then his son comes after him, and the Rebbe turns back to the father. And you know, all the good stuff by dollars happen when the Rebbe calls you back. So the Rebbe turns to the father, and he offers him a $2, and says to him in Yiddish, Das is far v'higad levincha. Using the very same expression he had used 40-something years before, when he had given his father the bracha for a child. He gave it to the son now. He says, this is for v'higad levincha. So l'chaim v'lebracha. We should all be zeich to v'higad levincha, b'simcha, b'atzlacha, b'nachas. L'chaim v'lebracha. Akash nefredig and Pesach. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim.